Miss Loretta May Jenkins never imagined she'd be raising a child at 67 years old. Life had already worn her down with arthritis creeping in her joints and a social security check that barely stretched past the first week of the month. But when her only daughter, Shanae, got caught up with her no-good boyfriend, DeMarcus, trying to cash a forged check, Miss Loretta had no choice but to take in her 7-year-old grandson, Tyrell. At first, she told herself it was temporary. Just until Shanae get out, she'd mutter, stirring the last of the rice in a pot that seemed to always be running low. But months passed, and then a year, and Shanae's parole kept getting denied. Meanwhile, bills stacked up on the kitchen table like a game of Jenga. And soon enough, the power company pulled the plug. Miss Loretta lit candles around the house, trying to make it seem like an adventure for Tyrell. "Grandma, why we got to eat cold food again?" he asked one night, his small voice laced with confusion. She smiled through her worry. "Because we doing it like back in the old days, baby," she said, rubbing his little head. But the next morning, a letter from the landlord made her heart drop. Eviction notice. Miss Loretta stormed down to the office, gripping the paper in her hands. "How you're going to put me out when I've been paying rent?" Mr. Leonard, the property manager, sighed. "Miss Jenkins, it's a policy. If your electricity off, we legally can't have you living here." Her voice cracked. "And where I'm supposed to go with a child?" He avoided her eyes. "I'm real sorry, Miss Jenkins. You got 2 weeks." She left that office with a heavy heart. For the first time in years, she let tears slip down her wrinkled cheeks. She had fought too hard in life to be thrown out like this. But she wasn't about to let them see her fold. That night, she did what she never thought she'd do. She prayed. Not one of them cute church prayers, but a real, deep, soul-shaking prayer. "Lord, I don't know what to do no more. I'm tired. I need a blessing, Jesus." And a blessing came, but not in the way she expected. The next morning, Tyrell was outside playing when he found an envelope stuffed under the rusty metal stairs. "Grandma, look what I found." Inside was a stack of cash. Miss Loretta's heart pounded. She looked around, expecting someone to come running back for it. But there was nobody, just silence, except for the distant sound of car horns and the wind blowing through the trees. "Where you get this, boy?" she asked. "Right there by the steps," he said, pointing. She counted it, $5,000. Her hands trembled. Was this a test from God or a trap from the devil? She debated turning it in, but something in her spirit told her that money was meant for her. Still, Miss Loretta wasn't no fool. She didn't touch a dime of it until she went to her neighbor, Miss Denise, who had a cousin working at the bank. "Baby, let me tell you something," Miss Denise whispered. "If you gonna use that money, you best clean it first. Put it on a prepaid card, buy some groceries, but don't go flashing it around." Miss Loretta took her advice. First thing she did was pay up her bills. Lights came back on that same evening. Tyrell danced around the house like it was Christmas morning. A week later, news broke that the old drug dealer from down the block had been robbed. Word was, somebody took his stash and his cash. Miss Loretta's stomach knotted. Was that where the money had come from? That night, she had a dream of her own, Mama standing in the kitchen, shaking her head. "You know right from wrong, Loretta May," her Mama's voice echoed. The next morning, she did what she knew was right. She took what was left of the money, went straight to the church, and handed it to Pastor Reggie. "Use this for the food pantry," she said. Pastor Reggie's eyes widened. "Miss Loretta, where this come from?" She just shook her head. "Don't ask, just do right by it." Days later, an even bigger blessing came. A lawyer named Mr. Whitmore showed up at her door. "Miss Jenkins, I'm representing an anonymous donor who heard about your situation," he said, handing her an envelope. "They wanted to make sure you and your grandson stay on your feet." Inside was a check for $20,000. Miss Loretta gasped. Who did this?" The lawyer just smiled. "Let's just say, sometimes good deeds get rewarded." With that money, Miss Loretta not only caught up on bills, but bought a little house of her own. A real home, where she and Tyrell could finally have some peace. And as for the stolen money, the dealer never came looking, and folks figured he either got robbed by another hustler or somebody he crossed. But Miss Loretta, she walked away clean, knowing the Lord had worked it all out in his own way. And from that day forward, she never had to pray for a miracle again, because she was living in one.